This project all started over a year ago when we poured this patio. Now, Frank thought far enough ahead where he sank these threaded rods into the fresh concrete. Underneath each bolt is a footing that goes 42 inches down. That's going to support the post, which is going to support our roof.
What about that?
Each metal post base is secured with a washer and a nut, and we do have a little wiggle room before we tighten things down, and we're making sure that everything's perfectly square before we start setting posts. We're actually off an eighth, but we're not building a piano here. Next, we're going to use a laser level to find our height. Now, before I arrived, Frank roughly knew where he wanted the porch beam to rest on the old roof. We're using the laser to ensure that the beam rests in exactly the same spot on each side of the porch, and this is also going to give us our height of our first post. The way we set our posts, we set them in the bracket, then we got everything as plumb and as level as we could, and then we just kind of tacked it in place with some screws. After that, we set the beam on top, and once we had the beam on top, it didn't really wiggle around too much. We were going to get the whole length done before we braced
Are they
it.
from Finland?
Just to make sure that laser's out of the way and it doesn't get knocked and there's no confusion, I set it at the exact height that the future posts need to be cut. Now, let's take a quick gander at the laser we're using. It's a low light condition, so we can actually see the laser. So if we were setting the height of our post, we could just mark it because we can see it. But in the sunlight, we need to use a receiver to find our exact height. When it's blue, right there it's blue, and that gives us an exact height. So we got our level line. How do you find that angle? This would be 0 on the miter saw. 10, 20, 35 degrees. Once we have the post set, we can start resting the beams on top. This is actually going to be a 3-ply beam, and we're just making sure that we stagger the seams. Hey, if you're still watching, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps out a lot. Thank you. Now that we have an area that's not all concrete, we can put some braces in, and this just kind of helps stiffen everything up. Really, left to right, we're good once we have a beam on top, but front and back, we get a little bit of movement.
Dead nuts.
And with that laser level, we are dead nuts. Now, before we start on that last row, we're going to make sure that everything's square up top as well. And Frank's side over there, we end up having to push things in just a hair, 1/4 of an inch, and then we're good to go. Then we do that final side. Here's a look at our porch base, and some of these posts were a little too fat, so we had to do a little bit of trimming. And I already know what you're going to say, these screws aren't approved, and you're right. We're just tacking them in with the screws, but we add the hardened nails in after, so already know.
The only thing I see.
The porch, it wanted to keep drifting out, so to secure it so it was perfectly straight, we just used a ratchet strap.
Honestly, I couldn't
It worked great. This is the next day, day 2. Here's a look at our nice straight beam, and Frank added these nice decorative connectors. And if you look, we notched the post. So that's a nice way to set the beams so they don't roll. You know that they're nice and straight. And he just secured them with some lag bolts. And here's a look at the angle bracket. And again, we used a little string. You can see the string there. We used just to make sure everything was nice and straight. All right, we're getting ready for trusses. And we set ourselves up for success. That's about the only thing we did right with the trusses is we put blocks in. And I cut these blocks at 22 3/8, and that ensures that everything's going to be 24 on center. The truss can set on each side of that block, so we don't. Once we set the truss, we don't have any guessing to do. We got that ratchet strap out of the way, and we put that big, huge brace on there, and that's called a strong back we're putting on the end there. That's 2 2x4s screwed together, and that's going to prevent the truss from falling over the end. Thank God we had them in there. And ladies and gentlemen, that is called foreshadowing.
Hold on 1 minute.
So these things were fairly heavy. This is the first truss is heavier than the other ones. The rest are scissor trusses. And I know a lot of people set these upside down, then flip them over. And if we had a third guy, that was the plan. But we didn't feel like we were strong enough to set it and then flip it.
3.
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Oh.
All right, I think we're still good.
We're good.
Yeah. You want to?
So I didn't edit this out.
Hold on.
I wanted to be transparent. This was humbling.
Okay.
And
All right.
really the strong backs would have worked if they were a little bit taller, maybe in a different spot, but we ended up getting through it. If you've set trusses with 2 people and you have a better way, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah.
Although you probably don't need encouragement, you're probably already typing away. But I will say, we did get better.
All right.
So we nailed that truss to the beams, and we also screwed it to that strong back, so it's not going to go anywhere. Now we're going to add some 25.5-inch braces. This is going to be the perfect width, so when we set that other truss, we can line that truss up with the edge of the board. You'll see what I mean. And this is just a nice, easy way to properly space the trusses. You see here how that brace lines up perfectly with that other truss, so those trusses are going to measure 24 on center. Some people put the braces on the inside so you don't have to remove them, but I guess that's personal preference.
You want to screw it into that side there?
And Frank is going to secure the side of that truss to the block. Those blocks were just a nice, easy way to set the trusses in the right spot, as opposed to setting the trusses and then looking for a pencil mark. And by this point, we got into a nice little groove. We ended up leaving that first brace off where Frank is at, and we left the other brace up where I'm at. And we put the brace on after. We found that it was just getting in the way of lifting the truss and putting it into place, so we put it in after. At this point, it's really starting to look like something. We get these last few trusses set. Now it's time to figure out where the new roof is going to tie into the old roof. By using a level, we're going to find a straight plane to the old roof. We're going to make a couple marks, then we're going to snap a chalk line. And these nailers that we're nailing on, it's going to follow the plane of the roof. Next, it's time to install our ridge beam. And the way we found the plane of the top of the truss to where our ridge beam dies, we just used the line. I went 3 trusses back, stretched the line, and it ended where that arrow is. Another way to do this is with a straight edge. You can find the same mark, but I've seen a line used by an actual carpenter, so I figured we could do the same thing. And by the time that beam was up, we put a level on it, we were good to go. It was nice and level. Next, it's time to lay out that ridge beam. From that very right truss, I stretched the tape measure and measured 24, 48, 72, etc. And now we have to find it on our nailer. The way we do that is with a framing square. We're going to move the framing square down the edge of that first truss. And as we move it across that nailer, that's going to ensure that it's 24 inches away from that truss. So this 24 inches is going to match up with the 24 inches we measured on the ridge beam. So now we need to find the longest measurement from the rafter down to our nailer.
So before we did this project, I was super intimidated about these roof angles, and it's really not that bad. We need to know 2 angles, and the first angle is super easy. It's the angle of our truss. So we already know that the trusses are 612.
So if the trusses are 612, we need to make that same roof line with our rafters. So the first angle we're going to find with the speed square, and we're going to cut this angle where it ties into the ridge beam. And then so it says pivot right here, and we're going to pivot until the common rafter is at 612. So we're at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're at 6. So we're going to mark that right there. So we're going to cut that.
The next angle we need is the bevel angle, and that's the angle of the roof that we're laying onto. To complicate things, we have 2 different of those. We have an 812 and then we have a 412. But first things first, let's do the 812, and I'll show you how I got that.
So we got our mark here,
And the way we find this angle is with a carpenter square. The angle is at 6, and we find 12. And we're using the outside of the square, and then we're going to mark that line. But we're also going to cut it at a bevel, which is 812, which is 33.6 degrees or 33.69. So, and then the long side is going to be the left side. So we're going to bevel. We're at 30, like 33 and a little bit more. So that's going to be our bevel, and that's for 812. We're going to tighten that guy down.
There you go. So that's our long 612 measurement and our bevel.
This is the finished cut up against the playscape. This would sit up against the ridge beam. And then our long side is on the left. And we got our bevel too.
Hopefully that's not too confusing, although this is a confusing roof with these two different roof pitches to tie into. And it was getting later in the day. I didn't do a good job of videoing how we installed the rafters because we noticed we had an issue. The two different roof pitches created kind of an odd valley that was going to be hard to keep watertight. It seemed like it'd be prone to leaking. So we determined we were going to try to finish sheathing the roof as much as we could. And then with the help from a carpenter friend of mine, Steven, thanks Steven, we were going to create just one straight valley, and the way to do that was to make the old roof lay onto the new roof. So this is our practice side. This is the side we were honing in our technique, and then I videoed the next side.
Okay,
so here we go.
Chalk line snapped that follows that ridge. It's going to end right here.
So the chalk line represents our nice straight valley, and now we're going to build the old roof onto the new roof. I think that solves our water issues. So to find the location for our nailers, we have to take into account the roof sheathing as well.
It'd be nice if
So I've done a bad job of talking about this, but we don't nail the 2x4s right on the chalk line. We got to take into account the sheeting where it's going to plane out. So the 2x4 is actually away from that chalk line, about an inch.
We're going 24 on center. Got one there. 24, 48. Then we transferred our marks down here. This one was easy. Just use a square. Ish.
That's going to be the long end this way, and it's going to be beveled that way.
Yeah. So 22. It looked like the whole thing was beveled from this side.
Yeah. So 22. The long side's the other side though, right?
Yeah.
So let's and we want it to go that way.
That way and bevel.
And bevel in, yeah. So now that's 412. We're cutting this 412. 12. 4? 4. Dude, we're getting better.
Yeah. It's a little bit up, but
that's I think that's within our tolerances.
why don't we just cheat it over a bit?
Yeah. It's a lot easier.
Should put that one in first.
I know.
Yeah, that's all I was doing up there.
Yeah.
Fencer wood.
Yes. Yeah, it's been, yeah, nice tight growth rings. Perfecto.
Yeah, it is true, man. We got better on each one.
Maybe it's nice and straight. How's it look from down there? Hey, I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Thanks to my buddy Frank for
Straight-ish.
letting me video this project. And we'll see you on the next one. Let me know if you got any questions. Got to check out the last picture with the roof on it. Be-doo-ba-ba-ba.